Hey friends, it's Rana, and today we are gonna talk about all the books that I've recently read and finished in the past 2 months, October and November. I stopped doing monthly wrap-up videos because I found myself not having that much to say about the few books that I've read. I tried to do this bi-monthly wrap-up video for August and September, and I really liked it. That's why I'm doing it again for October and November, given that I really don't like doing the monthly wrap-up videos. Some of these books I was supposed to do separate review videos for, but as you saw from my previous videos, I wasn't really in the mood to do any videos, so I'm making this video to talk about all the books and wrap them up in just one video. So the first book the first book I finished in October, it is Woman Word by Amanda Dhaliwal. It is a cute graphic novel. I talked about it in my last video, and it was a fun, fast read. I read it at work quickly, like in less than an hour, and I enjoyed it. It wasn't one of the best graphic novels I ever read, but it was enjoyable enough. So it talks about the future of our world where, for some reason, men became extinct, and it is only women and girls in this world. And it is a snippets of random women lives in the future, girls, and how they live their day-to-day life. It is humorous, cute, and I enjoyed it. Not that much, but I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, and I don't really have much to say about it. The next book, though, I have quite a lot to say about. This is one of the 2 books that I wanted to make a separate review video for, but I didn't get the time or the chance to do so. It is The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. So this book, it is quite popular and it is quite loved. And I was expecting to love it. It is like a 5-star prediction for me, and I ended up really not enjoying it. It is an unpopular opinion of mine again. I don't purposely go out of my way and read popular books I know I'm gonna hate, because this one I really believe that I'm gonna love. That's why I spent a lot of time to read the 1,000 pages of this book to end up not enjoying it. Pillars of the Earth is a historical fiction book set in the 12th century England, following multiple characters during their lives over the span of decades. And the idea of a church or the building of a church is in the background of the story. The thing is, I had the wrong idea about this book. I thought that it is like a crime thriller book with a historical setting. I don't know where that idea came from. I just had it the entirety of my life since I heard about this book. And when I bought it, I thought that it's gonna be similar to like the Da Vinci Code, but in a historical setting. And it was understandably very confusing to me when it turned out to be absolutely not that. As I said, it ended up being a historical fiction book following multiple characters, and the idea of building and constructing a cathedral is in the background of the plot. It also involves a lot of war and real historical events weaved into the plot. The book is really very long. It is like around 1,000 pages, and the audiobook is a little over 40 hours long. So I started listening to the audiobook every day after work on my way home on the bus, and it took me like around a month to finish. At first, I was really enjoying it, even though it turned out to be completely different than what I expected. But I was enjoying it until the first rape scene happened, and I was very shocked with how graphic the details were and how disgusting the character was. But I told myself, it's okay, Rana, you can stomach this, because you may say that it was to further the plot. But then the book started becoming very repetitive halfway through it, and SA and rape scenes kept happening out of nowhere and for no damn reason at all. They were totally unnecessary and disgusting, and nobody ever mentioned that when they review this book. I watched multiple review videos of this book, and nobody ever mentions these scenes, ever. They keep hyping this book up and say that it is so good and it is one of their favorite books ever, without giving any warning about the content. This was one of my biggest issues with this book, the horrible treatment of women in it, and they were always depicted as crazy, whores, or victim of rape, and they didn't have any personality or brains except for one character that kept going through shit over and over again and through many traumatic events. Like, I know it is the 12th century England, but what the heck, it was too much, very graphic, and nobody even mentions it. Like, there were no content warning, not from the author, the publisher, or even the reviewers. Also, the repetitiveness and redundant nature of this book was too much. Like, it went like this. Talking about building the church. Then something bad happens, an obstacle, something, overcoming this obstacle, killing some people. Again, talking about building the church, overcoming an obstacle, a new one, and it kept happening again and again, with the sprinkling and inserting of many SA and rape scenes throughout all of that. All of that kept being repeated and repeated for 900 plus pages, which made me really angry at the end. I gave the book 2 out of 5 stars because the idea of it, I really liked it. It is great, but the execution of it was awful. I didn't give it 1 star because I enjoyed the start of the book. If we ignore a certain character burying his wife after her death and immediately after getting with another woman. I think the day after or the same day he buried his wife. Yeah, it is not a spoiler. It happens literally at the start of the book. Also, I appreciated the insertion of real historical events. I learned some things because of that, but everything else was bad. Oh, I forgot to mention it. This book had a very offensive representation of Arab people, especially Christian Arab people. The author talked about Christian Arab family in Spain at some point in the book, and it was really terrible. I didn't like his tone talking about them, and he mentions some really offensive things about Arabs in general, Muslims and Christians, and I didn't really like that. I wanted to stop reading this book to DNF it multiple times, especially towards the ending, but I kept pushing myself through it because I already read a huge chunk of it and it will be such a waste to DNF it without knowing the ending, so I finished it. I genuinely thought that I'm gonna enjoy this book and that it's gonna be the first of many books that I'm gonna read by Ken Follett, but it turned out to be a completely different scenario. I will never pick up another book by him ever again. So, the next book I finished is Evil Eye by Gitaf Room, a new release by this author. I first read her debut novel, A Woman Is No Man, last year. I love that book. I really enjoyed that book. It was very well written and executed with a devastating ending. It was so good to the point that I made a long review video of it, discussing it and my feeling towards it. So you will understand how excited I was to find out that she will publish another book, which is Evil Eye in 2023. I'm not really big on new releases. I only care about new releases by authors I already read and loved. So this was my top priority of 2023. And I listened to it immediately on script as an audiobook. It went so fast, I finished it in like a day and a half. Evil Eye is about a Palestinian American woman called Yara who married a charming entrepreneur, and she lives with him and her 2 daughters in the suburbs. She completed an undergraduate degree in arts, and she is currently working at the local college, not in the position she wants, but close enough to be on track to achieve her dream. She seems like she is living a great life, or so she thought, until at work they started talking about this Europe trip. I didn't quite understand what is it about, but it is for their work and their job at the college, where they can apply to it, all the employees at the college, and whoever they pick will travel to Europe for something about their job. Yara wasn't really that much excited about this trip. She was interested in it a little bit until one of her colleagues made a racist comment to her, saying that, oh, I didn't realize that you are going to apply to this trip because your Middle Eastern husband won't allow you to, and you are so oppressed, or whatever, something along these lines, which made Yara very angry, and she reacted in not so good of a way. And she went back home and told her husband about her desire to go on this trip, to apply to it and go in it. But he said no, because who gonna take care of their house? Who is gonna take the daughters to school and take them back? Which really made her very angry, and they got into this huge argument about it. Since that, she started doubting her reality, and that she isn't really living the great life she thought she was living. And the rest of the book is just history. She is kept whining and talking about all the sacrifices she made for her family to her new friend that she thought that she might have fallen in love with, until he turned out to be gay. I don't know, what does that have to do with anything? But okay. I was tired and frustrated of this book because I had really high hopes for it after reading A Woman Is No Man, but this book was not it. I kept speeding up the audiobook because I just wanted it to finish. I'm done. I was so done with it. I just wanted it to end. And funny enough, nothing happened when I sped the audiobook. Nothing important happened the remaining chunk of the book. Yara was annoying, her husband was annoying, everything about this book was annoying, and the plot and the writing were very weak. I didn't like them. There were no substance to the story, no important message such as the first book. Even the ending was not good. She kept whining and whining, lost her job, filed for divorce, and that's it. The book was full of spouses' argument and drama, and not in a good way. They both sounded stupid and immature, and the way they talk to each other doesn't indicate that they have been living a happy life so far, when suddenly everything went just downhill. I was honestly very disappointed and let down because, like I said, I genuinely feel like the author saw the success of her first book and just went ahead and wrote this worse, watered down version of it, thinking that us readers will read it and still praise her for it. But no, it was just bad, really bad, and I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. It really saddened me that I hated this book, but what can I do? It was just really bad. On a lighter note, the next book I read is Love from A to Z by S.K. Ali. So this book, it is a YA romance book with Muslim representation. It talks about our main character, Zainab. She is a Muslim. I believe she is brown, like Pakistani or something like that. I don't quite remember where she is exactly from, but she is in America now. And something happened at school. I don't like to spoil things. And she got suspended. So her family sent her to her aunt in Doha in Qatar for an early start of spring break to get away from all the things that happened at school. And there, on her way and on the plane, she meets this other main character called Adam. He is half Korean, he is also Muslim, and things start happening between them when they find out that they are actually both going to Doha, and they became friends. Things happens and whatever. It tackles a lot of heavy subjects. It doesn't focus as much as the romance side of the book, but it has some cute moments, but the heavy moments are more. I really enjoyed it. It is my first time reading a romance YA book with Muslim representation, and I really enjoyed and appreciate the representation because it was done very well. It felt very natural and wasn't forced, because it is the author herself is Muslim, so that's why I believe the book turned out so good. I enjoyed it and gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I think I'm gonna pick up more books by S.K. Ali. I like her style of writing. Her books are quick to read, and there's nothing in this book I disliked. It was a really good book, but I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Funny how I enjoyed it because I'm not really big on the YA romance genre or the romance genre in general, but I enjoyed this one. The next book I read is Crossroads by Laurel Hightower. It is a horror book a very short horror book. It talks about this woman who lost her child in a car accident, and one day a drop of blood falls from her hand into her son's memorial roadside or something like that, and it awakens something. Is it her son? Is it something, a bad spirit? You need to read it to find out. The reason I read this book is because I heard multiple booktubers that I trust their taste saying that they loved it. One of them even cried at the end of this book. I didn't like it. I don't understand why these booktubers talked about it and enjoyed it so much. I just thought that it is like a Pet Cemetery wannabe, and it wasn't good. I really didn't like it. It was confusing a little bit, and I can't say much of it about it because it was so short, so anything I say might spoil it. But if you want to read it, go ahead, but I didn't really like it. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. And the next book I read is Killing the Guys Who Killed the Guy Who Killed Lincoln by Jesse Joyce. This book is a very short audiobook, a script exclusive audiobook. It is like 1 hour and a half, 2 hours, and I listened to it. It was fun. I can't remember anything about it, really. I only remember a few things about it. It talks about the guys who killed the guy who killed Lincoln. Exactly that. But for some reason, it was very forgettable to me, and I gave it 3 stars. I didn't really enjoy the sense of humor in it. It is marketed as funny historical book, but I didn't laugh or smirk at anything, at any of the jokes, and I give it 3 stars. I forgot to remove this book from the shelf, and you have been looking at it the whole time. I'm sorry. The next book I read and finished, I can't believe I honestly finished this book. It took me so long to finally finish it. It is Oathbringer, Part 2 by Brandon Sanderson. If you know, I read Part 1 last year. It's been exactly 1 year since I finished the first part, and I didn't really get myself to read the second part because I really didn't like the first part. I didn't enjoy it, so I had a hard time to pick up this one. The Oathbringer, Part 2, it is the 3rd book in the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. I read the first book, it was really good. Read the second book, it was amazing, one of my favorite books ever. And this book is the 3rd book. So this series, it is a high fantasy epic series following multiple characters, and I'm not gonna even try to explain the plot because it is so complex and I don't have the brain to do that right now. But each book of his in the series talks about all the characters, and each chapter is from the point of view of a different character. But each book of them will mainly focus on one of these main characters. The first book, the Way of Kings book, it focused on Kaladin, my favorite character. Then the second book, Words of Radiance, focused on Shallan, and I liked it. It was an amazing book. Words of Radiance, just so damn good. The third book focused more on one of my least favorite characters in this book. No, let's be honest here. My least favorite character, I hate him. It is Dalinar. I just don't like reading from his point of view. It is just so boring, so boring. And what made it even harder for me to like this book and enjoy it, however, whatever the first part or the second part of Oathbringer, is because nothing much happens action-wise. Like the first book was slow, but things were happening. And the second book was so full of action and things. Third book, Oathbringer, mostly visions that Dalinar was having, random things from the past, with a little bit of character development and backstory of other characters, but not much excitement was there, not much action scenes, and it made it really hard to me to get through it. So I give it 3 out of 5 stars. I know it is a crime to give Brandon Sanderson anything less than 5 stars, but I really didn't like Oathbringer, and I hope Dalinar dies. I just don't like him. I don't like that man. When I finished this book, when I finished the last page, I felt like a huge weight off my shoulder, and I don't know when I'm gonna start the fourth book. What is it called? Rhythm of War, because the fifth book will drop soon, next year, 2024, as people said. So I really need to get around to reading the fourth book before the fifth comes out. The next book I finished is The Invisible Life of Adie Larue by V.E. Schwab. As I said when I talked about love from A to Z a moment ago, I'm not really big fan of romance books. This one is a romance fantasy book with a historical setting, and it is very huge and popular on the internet and in the real world. Everyone loves this book. I never thought I'm gonna ever read it until I read her other book, Vicious by V.E. Schwab. I adore this book. It is so good. It is everything I enjoy in books was Vicious. So when I loved it so much, I started thinking that I might try other books by her. So why not start her other most popular book ever, The Invisible Life of Adie Larue. In 1714 France, a young lady called Adie Larue makes a really bad bargain with the devil himself, and she is cursed to live forever, but everyone who meets her will immediately forget her the moment she leave the room or get out of their sight. And she lives like this miserable life for over 300 years until one day she stumbles upon a young man who doesn't forget her when she leaves the room. And it begins the adventure of finding out who is he and why he doesn't forget her. And meanwhile, they fall in love with each other. Was the book good? Yes. Was the romance bearable for me? Yes. And did I give it 4 out of 5 stars? Yes. Did I find it to be worth the hype? Absolutely not. It is a good book, but the hype that people give this book was out of this world. And I don't think it is that amazing of a book to give it all of that hype, especially that it is marketed as fantasy historical romance, but I can't see any part of the fantasy element in this book. It is like the book was like 60% Adie Larue living her day-to-day life and 20% romance and only like 10 or less percent fantasy. I didn't find enough fantasy in this book to be marketed as fantasy romance. I believe if it had more fantasy elements in it and more risks, it would have been a better book in my eyes. But overall, I give it only 4 out of 5 stars. It is good, but not quite my taste or what I wanted from it, because a lot of the time I forgot that it is supposed to be a fantasy book and it felt more like a contemporary romance. The next book I read is a non-fiction Arabic book called تحرير المرأة by Qasim Amin. I don't think I'm gonna talk about it much in this video. I might make a separate video for it, reviewing it with English subtitles, but I don't believe I'm gonna talk about it much. It is a very old book. It is like published in the 1900 and I really have many thoughts about it. That's why I'm thinking of making a separate video for it. But in short, it is one of the first books talking about women's rights in the Arab world in the Middle East. And the author of it, he is Egyptian. He faced a lot of criticism for it because at that time, the Arab society doesn't really talk about women's rights. I know Islam gave women rights, but we as a society failed women. So he talks about women's rights in that period of time. It felt very outdated, but like a good place to start. And many people said that it had a huge impact for women in Egypt. I never heard of this man ever before last year, and when I heard about this book, I read it now to see why so many Egyptians hate him. But that will be another discussion for another video, maybe. I give it 3 out of 5 stars. It felt very outdated, but I appreciate his effort for his time. The next book we have is Allegedly by Tiffany D. Jackson. This book is like mystery, kind of thriller book. It talks about Mary B, who is accused of killing her younger brother, and she was sentenced to jail. She served like 6 years in baby jail, they called it in this book, because she was a minor. And then she is now at a group home. It is like a juvenile facility. We don't really know throughout the book if she actually killed her brother, is her mother had any hand in it, because she didn't really confess her murder. I read this book because I really enjoyed Monday's Not Coming, her other book that I read. It was so good. I really enjoyed that book. But this one felt, I don't know, it didn't feel right. I didn't enjoy it. It was not up to bar with Monday's Not Coming. And the twist at the end, I saw it from miles away. So I didn't really enjoy this book. I gave it, I think, 3 stars. Let me check. I give it 2 out of 5 stars. It wasn't that good. The next book I read is one of my picks for nonfiction November, and it is The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat by Oliver Sacks. In this book, Oliver Sacks talks about different patients of his having rare or unusual neurological diseases, and what happened to them, how they diagnosed them. Some were treated, some were not, and how they lived the rest of their lives. I liked some parts of it, but most of it I didn't enjoy the way he wrote this book. I learned some things in this book, but overall it wasn't what I was looking for. It was good. I know many people who love this book. For me, it was okay. I give it 3 out of 5 stars, and I don't really have much to say about it and why I didn't enjoy it. It's just the writing style or the way he approached these stories I didn't really enjoy. The next book I read is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. Another case of me trying to give the romance genre a chance, and for some reason, romance books feel so cringy to me. I don't know why. I just don't like them. I prefer romance movies, not romance books. Especially contemporary romance books, they feel so cheesy. Better Than the Movies talk about this girl who she lost her mother when she was young, but she had this special bond with her mother. They bonded over rom-coms. Her mother was a big fan of rom-coms, so throughout this book there were a huge number of references to rom-coms, real rom-com movies. This book is full of tropes. Every trope you can imagine is in this book. A dead parent, enemies to lovers, love triangle, fake dating, everything you can think about is in this book. But for some reason, it is so very hyped on YouTube recently, and I thought that maybe this many people are agreeing on something. Maybe this book is really good, and it has a really high rating on Goodreads. It has 4.29 average rating with more than 250,000 ratings, and I don't understand why. It was cute, nothing really that terrible about it, but does it deserve that many ratings and average rating? Absolutely not. I give it 3 out of 5 stars. It was very predictable, and the references that they kept making of rom-com movies became too much at some point. Like, okay, we understand she loves rom-com movies. And the last book I read in November is The Bookseller of Kabul by Adie. So this book I thought was a historical fiction book set in Afghanistan, but it turned out to be like a memoir. So I put it on my nonfiction November TBR and I read it. Talk about this woman, Adie Sirstad. She goes and lives with a family, Afghani family in Afghanistan during the, the Taliban occupation of Afghanistan. And she lives with them like for 6 months. And in this book, she writes this family's story. The head of the family is a bookseller. He owns, I think, 3 bookshops, and he loved books. He kept selling books, even banned books, during the Taliban occupation, and he has 2 wives and a lot of children, and it talks about him, his wives, some of his children, other characters or other people on their lives, and every chapter or something, it talks about different person or different event that happened to them. I didn't like this book. The author of this book acts like a narrator who tells the story of this family, and for some reason throughout this book she had this condescending undertone in her writing, like she is judging them without actually judging them, by making some statements about how backwards they are, how horribly they treat their women, and their extremist way of thinking. And I really didn't like it. She didn't have much positive things to say about this family, given that she claims that she lived with them for a few months and she loved them. But throughout this book, she doesn't really talk that much positively about them. She always talks about the bad things they did, the way they treated their women, the bad things they say, how they force minor girls to marry and whatever. I really didn't like it. I know people in some communities do these things, but she didn't mention anything positive about them. There must be something positive about these people for her to let her write a book about them, to welcome her in their home for a couple of few months. But she doesn't really mention the good side of them. She only talks about the horrible things that they do or did or say. I just really didn't like the way she wrote this book and her tone. That's why I gave this book only 2 out of 5 stars. And the way it ended was really abrupt, and she didn't actually give a good conclusion to this book, and it wasn't satisfying at all. Also, how she jumped from a story to a story to a story was disconnected. It didn't make sense. It was all over the place and terribly written with a bad undertone. So I really didn't enjoy this book and gave it 2 out of 5 stars. And you will probably see it in an unhaul if I ever did one. So that's it for all the 13 books I read in the past 2 months. It was really not that good of a wrap-up because only 2 books were 4 stars and I enjoyed, and the rest were 3 and 2 stars. I don't know what is happening to me. Is it my reading slump? Is it my depression episode that is making me hate everything I read? I don't know what is it, or is the books actually just bad? I even didn't read all my nonfiction TBR pile. I only read 2 of that pile, extra one in Arabic, and now I'm currently reading Sapiens. But I'm doing something in December to make me love reading more and to start 2024 with a fresh start. Let's see if it's gonna work. I'll keep you updated. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to see my future videos, and I will see you next time. Bye!